November 2nd, 1944. Stalag IX-C, Thuringia. The frost has already crept through the cracks of the bakery wall. François Lemoine wipes flour from his hands and watches steam rise from the first loaves. Bread he will not eat. The air inside the camp bakery is heavy, thick with the smell of wet coal and sour yeast. Outside, snow drifts quietly against the wire. Every sound feels amplified: the clatter of tins, the sigh of the wind, the slow footsteps of a guard who never speaks. In this small room, warmth is both comfort and curse. The oven glows with a life the men themselves are losing. François works in silence, sleeves rolled up, movements automatic. His hands remember a rhythm older than the war, shaping, folding, pressing. In Lyon, before the uniforms and the numbers, he had baked for his neighbors at dawn, greeting them with the first scent of crust breaking in the air. Back then, each loaf meant life continuing. Now it is ration, survival, obedience. When the alarm bell sounds for roll call, he does not look up. He has already counted the dough, weighed the flour, measured the distance between the present and the life he lost. He knows that in this camp, hunger is not measured by the stomach. It is measured by what one dares to give away. The train that brought François to Thuringia had no windows, only slits for air. He remembers the way men stood shoulder to shoulder for 2 days, pressed between bodies that no longer smelled human. When the doors finally opened, they stepped into a world drained of color. Gray sky, gray mud, gray faces watching from guard towers. At Stalag IX-C, the fences rose higher than trees. The first sound he learned to recognize was the scrape of boots on gravel during appel, the daily roll call. Each morning began with a whistle and ended with the taste of cold coffee made from roasted barley. In that routine, time dissolved. The men stopped counting days, they counted the lives of others. He was assigned to the bakery not for strength, but for his trade. It was a curious mercy to work with fire when the world was freezing. The ovens were crude, brick mouths glowing orange in the half-light. The flour sacks arrived under guard, stamped with the Reich's Black Eagle. Lemoine learned to bake bread from the same grain that fed his captors, and that irony never left him. The guards seldom spoke except to give numbers or orders. One of them, Karl Ritter, barely 19, had the pale skin of someone too young for war. His uniform hung loose, sleeves frayed at the edges. When he checked the work logs, his hands shook slightly, as though the pencil weighed more than a rifle. Sometimes when François looked up from his dough, he saw Karl watching him, not with cruelty but with curiosity. It was a strange, unspoken acknowledgement between two men caught in different kinds of cages. Beyond the wire, the village of Witzleben lay half-starved. Smoke from small chimneys drifted into the sky like quiet prayers. The prisoners could see children waiting near the fence when work details passed, faces pinched by cold, their eyes following every movement of the wagons carrying bread to the garrison kitchens. François noticed one girl in particular. She stood at a distance wearing a coat several sizes too large. Her fingers blew around a bundle of firewood. When she smiled, a flicker, nothing more, he felt something inside him thaw, and it terrified him. The war was supposed to strip men of tenderness, yet every night as he swept the flour from the workbench, he wondered whether compassion itself might be the last act of resistance left to him. By December, the frost had hardened into habit. The ovens were still burning, the hunger unending, and François began to understand. Mercy would not survive here unless someone chose to hide it. Before dawn, the siren wailed across the barracks. Men stirred, boots scraping against wood, the breath of 100 prisoners turning to mist in the cold. François buttoned his threadbare coat and stepped outside, the ground crunching beneath him. He knew the way by memory now, through the gates, past the kennels, to the low brick bakery that smelled of smoke and yeast. Inside, he took his place among the work detail. 6 Frenchmen, 2 Belgians, 1 interpreter. The ovens never cooled. Even at night, their heat clung to the air like a living thing. They baked for the guards, the hospital, the Wehrmacht depot in Weimar. None of it was meant for them. The men joked without smiling, their words muted by the hiss of steam. The flour was coarse, flecked with sawdust and rye husk. François sifted it through his fingers, feeling the grit bite his skin. He measured carefully. Each gram accounted for, each batch inspected. But when the guards turned away, his hands worked faster, his motions precise, untraceable. He would take a handful, no more, and slip it beneath his apron. Over hours he collected enough to form a secret mixture in an empty ration tin. At night, while the others slept, he baked his contraband in the dying embers, shaping small loaves that could fit inside a pocket. The first time he gave one away, he was shaking. The recipient wasn't another prisoner, but a child, the same girl he'd seen by the fence. Her name, he later learned, was Elsa Ritter. Karl had been watching too. The young guard didn't report him. He only stood by the gate and let the silence pass between them. That night, François expected punishment, but it never came. The next morning, Karl nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "I saw what you did." The weeks blurred together. Snow turned to ice, ice to slush. Hunger made the men speak in fragments. To survive, one had to master stillness, to appear neither too strong nor too weak, to exist without attracting notice. Yet every night, François's secret grew heavier. He began to save crusts from the official rations, wrapping them in strips of paper from old flour sacks. Each loaf he gave away was a confession without words. In the bakery ledger, the numbers still balanced, but morality had become uncountable. The camp routine was his cover. Dawn, knead dough. Midday, feed ovens. Evening, clean tools, hide mercy. Karl's complicity deepened. Once he brought an old canteen filled with milk, contraband from his mother's ration. He left it near the mixing bench without a word. François didn't thank him. Gratitude was dangerous. It named you, connected you, made you real in a place built to erase. Each day ended the same. Smoke, silence, the scent of baked bread carried across the snow toward a village that no longer believed in kindness. The men of Stalag IX-C slept beside their hunger. François Lemoine slept beside his guilt, the guilt of still feeling human. Night in Thuringia came without ceremony. The sky dimmed to ash, and the camp dissolved into a hush broken only by the barking of dogs and the cough of men pretending to sleep. In the bakery, the last embers glowed faintly, red eyes in the dark. François lingered, pretending to clean the benches. The others had gone. He reached for the small tin hidden behind a crate. Inside, the dough rested under a scrap of cloth, its rise imperfect but alive. He touched it as if it were something fragile, a secret heartbeat. Kneading softly, he shaped it into 3 small loaves, each no larger than his hand. Outside, frost crept along the window panes. The snow carried sound in strange ways. Even a whisper could travel. He moved quickly. When the fire had burned low enough not to draw attention, he slid the loaves inside. The scent rose almost instantly, warm, defiant. A shadow moved near the door. It was Karl. The young guard stepped in quietly, closing the door behind him. His breath formed clouds in the cold. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them held every forbidden word they could not say. Karl pointed to the loaves, then to himself. "For my sister?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. François nodded. He could see the exhaustion in the boy's face, the hollowness of someone ordered to stand watch over suffering. Karl set down a folded piece of paper, a ration chit, signed but unnumbered, and pushed it toward him. It was a gesture, not payment, a way to pretend this was an exchange and not mercy. They both knew what it meant if anyone found out. For the prisoner, execution; for the guard, desertion by compassion. Later, near the fence, François slipped the loaves through a gap between the boards. On the other side, small hands reached from the dark. He didn't see the girl's face, only the motion, the quick withdrawal, the vanishing into the night. The warmth of the bread lingered on his fingers long after the cold had reclaimed them. The next morning the routine resumed. The ovens roared, the guards barked orders, the same hunger ruled every hour. Yet beneath that machinery, a current of quiet rebellion had taken hold. A French prisoner, a German guard, a child between them. Mercy had become their shared secret language. But secrets have weight. Each loaf he baked in silence carried more risk, more meaning. It wasn't about bread anymore, it was about keeping the last piece of humanity from burning away. When François wiped the flour from his hands, he noticed Karl watching him again, no longer curious, now complicit. And for the first time since his capture, the baker smiled. It was small, weary, and fleeting, but real. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft enough to muffle guilt, heavy enough to bury evidence. By February 1945, the war was collapsing faster than news could travel. Allied bombers crossed Thuringia almost daily now. The sky trembled as the sirens wailed. Stalag IX-C was half-starved and half-abandoned, its commandant drinking more, shouting less. Yet the ledgers still mattered. In Germany, even hunger had paperwork. It began with a number. One morning, Hauptmann Wiegand noticed a discrepancy. 4 kilograms of flour unaccounted for. He summoned the quartermaster, the bakers, the guard roster. Men were questioned, their lockers searched. Flour was weighed, logs recalculated, excuses rehearsed. No one confessed. François felt the fear moving through the bakery like smoke. Every motion he made was deliberate now, slower, quieter. His secret loaves had ceased. The risk was too great. But one act of kindness has its own inertia. It never truly stops. Karl was the one who came to warn him. Late that night, when the barracks were dark, he appeared at the door again. His face looked older, the softness gone. "They are watching," he whispered. "The officer says someone is stealing for the black market." François shook his head. "I have stopped." Karl hesitated. "It doesn't matter." They already decided who it must be. Outside, snow was falling again, the kind that silences everything. François listened to it settling on the roof, the faint hiss against the chimney. He understood what the boy was trying to do, to give him time, a chance to hide or run, but there was nowhere to go. For him, the fence was the world's edge. The next morning, the bakery was searched. Wiegand stood in the doorway, his gloves spotless, his eyes calculating. He asked each man to step forward and state his name, rank, and duty. When François spoke, the officer looked at his hands, cracked, scarred, dusted with flour. "Baker," Wiegand said. "A noble trade, dangerous when the Reich is hungry." He ordered the ovens opened, the ashes sifted, nothing. Then, by chance or fate, a single crust fell from a loose brick behind the workbench, charred, irregular, unmistakably foreign to the camp's standard issue bread. Wiegand lifted it with his boot and smiled without humor. "That," he said, "is not regulation." Karl stood at attention, eyes fixed ahead, jaw trembling. François met his gaze once, not pleading, not apologizing, only steady. He did not speak when the officer demanded an explanation. He only said, "Bread burns easily when the fire is too hot." It was the kind of truth that sounded like defiance. By evening, François had been transferred to the punishment block. No record survives of what followed. The bakery continued without him. The ledger was corrected. The ovens kept burning. A week later, Allied shells thundered from the west. The guards began to vanish, the fences abandoned. When the Americans arrived in April, they found the bakery door hanging open, its inside still warm, as if someone had just left. On the workbench lay a single note, written in pencil, in uneven German, "For the children, not for me." Outside, in the ruins of Witzleben, villagers would later recall that on the coldest nights of that winter, they sometimes smelled fresh bread carried on the wind. When the war ended, the ovens of Stalag IX-C cooled to ash. The gates stood open under the April sun, and the air smelled of soot and damp wood. American troops found the camp half empty. Its guards fled, its records scattered like snow across the yard. Among the papers, one page from the ration ledger remained legible. Brotverlust, 4 kilogram, Ursache unbekannt. Loss of bread, cause unknown. They found no baker. The name François Lemoine appeared on the prisoner roll, annotated verlegt, transferred with no destination. In bureaucratic language, it meant disappeared. In the weeks that followed, Allied investigators moved through the villages around Bad Sulza, taking statements, mapping war crimes, sorting the living from the dead. In Witzleben, an old woman offered them tea made from dried roots and told them of a French prisoner who had given her grandchildren bread. She said he baked with his heart, not his ration. The interpreter wrote it down, unsure whether to classify it as testimony or rumor. Karl Ritter, taken prisoner by the Americans, was brought back to the camp for questioning. The officer asked about the missing supplies, the ledger, the baker. Karl stared at the blackened ovens and said only, "He made bread." That is all I remember. It was the truth, and it saved him. Weeks later, Karl walked home through a Germany unrecognizable. His village was a hollow shell of chimneys and silence. He found his sister alive, thinner than memory, clutching a piece of bread gone hard with time. She told him she had hidden it since the winter, the last loaf the Frenchman had given her. She kept it not to eat, but to remember warmth. In Lyon, the Lemoine family received a letter stamped with the Red Cross seal. Missing, presumed deceased. No remains, no grave. Only a name etched later on a memorial wall among thousands. Mort en captivité, 1945. The world moved on. Stalag IX-C became a hospital, then a ruin. The ovens were dismantled, the bricks repurposed for village homes. But on certain mornings, when the wind shifted, the scent of yeast and coal seemed to drift again across the fields. Perhaps memory, perhaps something else. War ends on paper. Mercy leaves no report. 20 years later, the camp was almost gone. Grass covered the parade yard. Rust consumed the fences. Children from Witzleben rode their bicycles along the old perimeter without knowing what it was. The barracks had collapsed, leaving only foundations swallowed by moss. The bakery's chimney leaned slightly, blackened but still standing. The last witness. In 1965, a French research team from Lyon arrived to document the remnants of Stalag IX-C for a project on POW labor camps. Among them was an archivist named Marie Lemoine. She carried a photograph of a man in uniform, smiling faintly, his hands dusted with flour. On the back was written, François, 1939, avant la guerre. Marie asked questions in halting German, reading names from the Red Cross lists. Most villagers remembered nothing. But an elderly woman, Anna Ritter, nodded when she saw the photo. "Yes," she said softly. "He baked for us when no one else would." She led Marie to her garden, where a single brick served as a border stone, dark red, heat-cracked, stamped faintly with an old army inventory mark. "That was from his oven," Anna said. "My son kept it after the Americans came." The archivist brushed her fingers across it, feeling the roughness, the warmth trapped in stone even after decades of rain. She did not cry. Historians seldom do. She only wrote the name in her notebook and the words, Boulanger inconnu, acte de miséricorde. When she left that evening, the sun was setting over Thuringia, low and gold through the birches. For a moment, the light caught the smoke of a nearby chimney and turned it white, like flour rising again into the air. Some stories never find their witnesses. They survive instead through gestures, rumors, and traces, too small for history's ledgers. In Witzleben, a child once reached through the wire for bread. In Lyon, a family still baked at dawn, the same recipe, the same patience. Between those places, invisible yet enduring, lay the scent of a kindness that defied hunger. The ovens were gone. The mercy remained. Some stories end in silence, not because they were forgotten, but because they were done for no reward. François Lemoine's act of mercy lives only in fragments, a burned ledger, a rumor, a single brick. Yet through those traces we glimpse what war tried to erase, humanity itself. If stories like this matter to you, the quiet ones, the untold ones, help us keep them alive. Subscribe to War Without Glory, where every week we uncover another moment when history became human.